If you were to believe what you see online, you'd assume that most people who start eating a carnivore diet just miraculously feel better, heal their diseases, and drop all their excess weight in a really short time. That's what most carnivore channels are talking about, and it seems to be the way most carnivore stories go. But not all of us have that experience. Today, I'm going to talk about my 3 years experience on a carnivore diet. I'm going to talk about where I've come from, the many difficulties I've experienced since eating this way, what's changed, and what hasn't changed for me so far. And I wasn't having any of that, so there was no point in me even going. So I went home, went to the library, and I got every book out that had alternative information in it about thyroid disease. And I jumped online and I started watching everything. And what I ended up doing, and it sounds a bit bizarre, but what I ended up doing was I did... Hi there, my name is Sue. I had my 3-year carniversary, so that's a carnivore anniversary, in case you've not heard that before. It was on the 31st of May this year, 2025. I made the switch to a carnivore diet back in 2022, and although my journey has been a bit of a roller coaster ride, a lot has changed. Now, this could be a long video, so I'd advise you to go make a cuppa, come back and get comfortable. I'm going to share some things on this video that I've never talked about before in any of my videos. If you don't have enough time, save the video on your watch list to watch it later, or do what I do, put the video on a faster speed. I watch most of them on 1.25, or just watch it in bits. Watch some and then come back later for the rest, because my story is not your typical carnivore diet fairy tale. Before we go any further, I want to tell you about Partiqlar supplements. They're a company that focuses on longevity and anti-aging. They're sponsoring this video, and I am more than happy to recommend them to you because I've had such great benefits from taking their products. Their NMN has truly been a bit of a miracle for me personally. As I'm about to discuss in this video, chronic diarrhea along with anxiety have been a curse and were destroying my life, even on a carnivore diet. They had got a bit better over the last couple of years, but were still very much a thing and just never really went away, not for long anyway. But since I started taking Partiqlar NMN almost 2 months ago now, my bowel habits have unexpectedly changed for the better, and so has the anxiety that has plagued me. Because of that, my life is changing. This is a huge topic that I'll talk more about in this video, but right now I just wanted to tell you that I'm a huge fan of Partiqlar supplements. They're third-party tested, they contain no additives, GMOs, flow agents, or any of that other stuff that so many supplement manufacturers put in their products. And they're made in the USA. You can check them out at the link below the video and use my code Carnivore15 for 15% off your order. Now let's get back to the video. I'm going to start at the beginning. I was the firstborn child in my family. I was born in Glasgow, Scotland, a bit over 61 years ago. My mother had had health challenges since she was a child, and I've always known that her health when she was pregnant with me affected my health and the things that I inherited from her. However, something that I've only recently learned from Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride's newer GAPS diet book that was published in 2020 is that the firstborn child actually cleans up the mother's body to make it healthier for subsequent children. This is why so many women have miscarriages when they first start trying to have children, because those first pregnancies may be exposed to too many toxins, depending on how toxic the mother's body is. So nature is a wonderful thing. But this sucks for those of us who get to start life with a toxic load inherited from mum. It explains a few things. I will pop a link to the GAPS diet book below the video if you'd like to know more. It's an amazing resource with tons of information, and I'm slowly wading my way through it. So anyway, I was sick quite a lot as a child. I mean, I was fairly healthy, but I had stuff going on, and probably stuff that was a little bit less common back when I was a child. So tonsillitis, I had my tonsils removed the year I started school because I was crop all the time with that. I had gut issues, so I was usually constipated. I often got tummy bugs, and I was often at the doctor with a sore tummy. That was the main thing that mum used to have to take me to the doctor for, was bellyache, and he would also just say she's constipated and send us home with some suppositories, which I absolutely hated. And then by the time I was a young teenager, I remember that my biggest issue really was gas. I would just get so full of gas. I remember coming home, please wear really tight jeans. I remember coming home after being out all day and half the night, and my belly would just be, I'd be in so much pain from hanging on to all this gas. It was quite a relief to get home and be able to let it go. And so that was really, really common when I was a teenager. And then after I had my first child, the abdominal issues ramped up. And so I was at A&E quite a lot with abdominal pain. There didn't seem to be any kind of rhyme or reason for it. I had tummy bugs often, and if the kids got tummy bugs, I was the one that always got them. Even if the kids didn't have tummy bugs, I'd still get what was supposedly tummy bugs. And then I went through a phase where I would often wake up early in the morning and vomit. After I'd had a roast, something fatty, that sort of thing, I'd be awake at like 5 o'clock in the morning vomiting. A lot of gas then as well, always had a lot of gas, and diarrhea. And constipation back then kind of used to alternate. We used to have issues with both. Always, if I was nervous or anxious about anything, the diarrhea was always a thing, right from when I was a teenager. But then the rest of the time it would kind of alternate between diarrhea and constipation. Now, we moved to Australia when my children were young. So we moved to Australia when I was 25 years old. And in those first 5 years that we were in Australia, my health deteriorated massively. I put some of it down to something called tubular ligation syndrome. So I had my tubes tied before we went to Australia because I didn't want to have any more kids. And some of it was almost like I went through like a menopause, I guess. It wasn't straight away, but it was after probably the first year that we were in Australia, everything just started to go downhill. Now, I don't know whether it was that or not, but I had massive weight gain. So I went from a size 14 up to about a size 24. That's Australia and New Zealand sizes. So my weight had gone from, I think I was sitting about 75 kilos when we went to Australia, and it went up to about 120, maybe more, because I stopped weighing myself. I don't know how high I actually got. So I had massive weight gain. I had anxiety and panic attacks that were debilitating. I actually stopped driving for 5 years, and I had a lot of gut and bowel issues. My anxiety and panic attacks, as I said, were debilitating. I got to the point where, as I said, I stopped driving for 5 years. I didn't want to go into the shops. I didn't want to go and stand in queues. Standing in queues was really difficult for me. I would be standing there basically having a panic attack, just wanting to run. But there were things that I had to do because my husband couldn't do them. So that was just the way that it was. But if I could get away with it, I would stay in the car and I would get him to go and do things because I just didn't want to. I didn't even want to leave home. I just wanted to stay at home. And I had been a little bit like that after I had my daughter as well, my first child. But because I had to go out, I was on my own with her and I had to go out, I just made myself. But this was way worse. This was way, way worse. And the panic attacks and everything were really quite bad. Now, my bowel and my gut were really bad at that time as well. I started having real problems with diarrhea. Anxiety would bring that on, even more so. And I was also having some issues, a little bit, not really bad, but a little bit with fecal incontinence, which really disturbed me at the time. I didn't tell anybody, didn't tell anyone. I just kept it hidden. I didn't tell anyone about my anxiety, nothing. I just managed it all myself and hid it, didn't go to doctors, and that was just the way that it was. The first food intolerance that I realised that I had was at that point. I realised that milk was an issue. And the reason that I discovered that that's what it was because I started finding that I would get up in the morning, I'd have breakfast, which would be usually like Wheat Bix and milk or something like that. And the kids would go off to school and then I would get really ill and I'd end up having to go back to bed because I'd be so crook. And so after a little while, I realised that, hey, maybe it's the milk that's making me sick. So I stopped the milk and that made a difference. Now, it might have been the Wheat Bix as well. So at that time also, I was a heavy smoker. So I actually started smoking when I was 9 years old. And that was due to the influence of the daughter of some friends of my parents. So she was 6 years older than me and she introduced me to smoking. And so I started smoking when I was 9. By the time I was 14, I was smoking all the time at home, in the house. And so I was a really heavy smoker, fully addicted to tobacco. And because I had got so unhealthy and so overweight, I got to the point where I couldn't breathe at night time. I would find myself having to go to bed 7 o'clock at night, 7:30, because I couldn't smoke anymore because I was so tight in my chest I couldn't actually take any more smoking. And if I couldn't smoke because I was such an addict, I had to go to bed. So that was what I did. I would just go to bed at 7:30 at night. So this is how I was when I was 30 years old. So massively overweight, seriously problems with breathing. I couldn't even ride a push bike. I bought a push bike to try and get some fitness back, and I remember going out with my daughter on my push bike, and I could pedal like 6 times, and then my legs would just not want to work. And I remember her saying to me, do you think you'll ever be able to ride into town, Mum? Because we were living 5 k's out of town. And I said to her, I don't know. So I remember taking the push bike home, parking it up, and not doing anything with that until later, because I quit smoking when I was 30. So as I said, I got to the point where I'd have to go to bed. I was really worried about my health. I was sick of myself. And so I sat there this night and I said to my husband, I'm not smoking anymore. I handed him the tobacco, and he kind of looked at me like, yeah, whatever, because we had multiple times tried to quit smoking in the past. But I had made the decision at that point, and I was like, I'm not doing it. I've had enough. That's me, done. So I stopped smoking, and everything changed. And I've never heard anybody else's story with being like mine. From the first day that I quit smoking, it was like something switched in me, and I just felt so much better. And I started exercising, and over 4 years I lost 45 kilos. So that's a lot of weight. That's can't remember what it is in pounds. I'll put it up on the screen. I have looked it up before. And so I went from a size 24 right down to a size 8, and then kind of back up to a 10, and that's where I stayed for quite a few years. And so I basically quit smoking and took up exercise. I was a total exercise junkie and really addicted to exercise. And I also took up drinking wine. So my anxiety went away, basically. My bowel improved, I started driving again, and life was good. And I would exercise for 5 hours a day a lot of the time. So it was a bit over the top with the whole exercise thing, but it made me feel good, and I was dropping weight, and I was looking great, and so I was happy. But then I gradually changed my diet. So I started eating healthier because, I was on this whole exercise thing and feeling healthy, and I was always interested in health, always interested in diet. So I started changing my diet, and then I became vegetarian, which I had played with before but never stuck with for very long. As I've spoken about in other videos, my dad was vegetarian, so he had a big influence on me, and I believed that plants were really good for you, and I believed that meat wasn't so good. So I became a vegetarian, and then I became a fruitarian, and then I became a vegan. So that was kind of the beginning of some problems returning, and I just didn't realise it at the time because my weight improved even more when I was fruitarian. I mean, when I went fruitarian, I felt amazing. I did that for about 3 months, felt fantastic, dropped the last 15 kilos that I lost. So I had lost 30 just with the exercise and little changes in my diet. And then I dropped another 15 kilos in 3 months. I now know that a lot of that was muscle. But, I thought it was great. I was a size 8. It was the smallest I had ever been in my whole life. And so I thought that was fantastic. And everybody was commenting, and telling me how great I looked. Da, 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 da. And so I was living my life and being happy and being skinny for a change. So I was a vegetarian for over a decade. So that was from my kind of early 30s to my early to mid 40s. I was back and forth in that time to a vegan diet. So I would go back to vegan and then back to vegetarian because, if you're eating plants, doing that harder and more strictly obviously has to be better, right? And so I would often eat a raw vegan diet as well. And the raw vegan diet really, when I look back, my bowel used to play up so bad back then, but I just kind of persevered, and because I thought it was the right thing to do. But then I started eating meat again when I was in my early 40s. I had come to the conclusion that I had a thyroid issue, from reading and researching and taking my temperature and stuff. I had gone to doctors a couple of times and asked them to do thyroid tests. The only test they would do was TSH, and always came back within range, and so they'd tell me there was nothing wrong. So I kind of gave up on them again and just did my own thing. I was probably about 42 or 43 at this stage. I had looked at the blood type diet in the past, but because my health was kind of going downhill a little bit, I decided to revisit the blood type diet. When I went and looked, I actually realised I had 2 copies of that book. So obviously I'd bought them at different times and looked at them and gone, throw it over my shoulder, because I'm an O positive blood type, right? Which is supposed to eat meat according to that diet. So that was when I decided to start eating meat again. And that was honestly like changing religion. That was actually really tough to make that decision. And the day that I decided to do it, I had to do it that day. And I remember we ended up going out somewhere and I didn't have any meat out. So I ended up going and buying a cooked chicken from the supermarket. And that was my first meat that I ate, which probably wasn't the best option. I remember it upset my gut. But I was determined I was going to try eating meat again. I had actually been craving meat for quite a long time, but I just didn't want to admit it to myself or anyone else. But afterwards, I realised that my body had been hankering for meat for quite a long time. And when I started eating meat again, I just couldn't get enough of it. I was eating massive steaks. And I remember my dad, we were out somewhere and I bought a steak. We were having lunch somewhere. And I remember my dad looking at me like, are you going to eat all that? And I was like, yeah. Because my body was so starved for those nutrients. Obviously, that happened again when I started carnivore. But I didn't realise back then that the meat was really the thing that my body really, really needed. I mean, even the fact that what happened was, with all this exercise that I'd been doing for all of these years, I couldn't run. Like I always felt like my legs were too heavy and had no energy in them. But I walked, so I was doing some triathlons and bits and pieces like that. And then all of a sudden, when I started eating meat, I could run. And my legs felt good. I didn't put the two together. And so even after starting to eat meat again, I still, over those years, in between then and starting carnivore 3 years ago, still kept going back to the vegan diet because I thought that was the healthy option. Now, in amongst all this time, I also had an increasing list of food intolerances. So it got to the point where it felt like I just couldn't eat anything. I'd find something that seemed to be okay, and I'd eat it for a little while, and then I'd become intolerant to it, and it would start upsetting my gut and causing problems. And I had so many foods that I just couldn't eat because they just upset me. I was always the difficult person, when you'd go to someone's house for dinner or whatever, and I can't eat that, and I can't eat that, and I can't eat that, because they would just make me crook. And so throughout these years, my health was okay. Like, it looked okay, and I thought I was pretty healthy. I was fit and I was strong and I was an exercise junkie. But I always had diarrhea issues and anxiety and depression and hormonal issues and probably thyroid issues. So there was all this stuff going on, a lot of endocrine stuff, but I just, I thought that I was healthy. As far as I was concerned, I was eating this really healthy diet. I avoided ultra-processed foods most of the time. I was gluten-free for a lot of years, didn't buy much in the way of processed foods. I just ate lots of fresh fruits and vegetables. Cooked at home and did all of that stuff. And so I thought that I was being as healthy as I could be, basically. And I looked healthy. People would tell me I looked young for my age, and, I seemed to be doing the right things, but there were still these things that were going on, and I didn't really talk about them to anybody. Didn't tell anyone. I just kind of managed everything. So anyway, when I was 44 years old, we had moved back to Australia and we decided to buy a business. Now, I've mentioned this in other videos, but I haven't really talked about it too much in any kind of detail. But what happened was we went back to Australia. We had been going to the gym here in the little town where I live now here in New Zealand. And it was a great little gym. I really enjoyed it. I'd been going and then my husband joined as well. And we liked going there. It was a nice little kind of community. The people that ran it were really good. And we had decided we were going to ship back to Australia. And we thought we might buy a business. And we thought, we would really like to buy a gym, Not something that we'd ever done before, not something that we were really kind of prepared for, to be honest. But that's what we decided to do. So we moved back to Australia and went looking to see if we could buy a little gym somewhere in a little town that, we could afford with the money that we had that came from our house. And so we found this little gym in a small town in New South Wales, and we bought it. And it was a big mistake because we got completely ripped off by the people that sold it to us. They continued to steal from us after we bought it from them because they were still using the building for their martial arts club. And so it was the male in the partnership was the main one. He was, continued to steal from us and undermine us. He had sold huge memberships to members before we took over the gym. So he had sold them like 5-year memberships, which is completely illegal. So that he had the money and we didn't. And he just seemed to be hell-bent on us not succeeding with that gym. So we bought that, and it was a massive, massive year of stress because as soon as we took it over, I realised the situation that we were in. And then it was 2008 and the financial crisis happened and that just compounded everything. And we ended up closing the doors and walking and just selling the equipment. And that was it. We made the decision to get out before we went bankrupt. And it was a really tough year, and it was major stress for me in particular because I'm the one that deals with everything financial, all the bookwork, all that sort of stuff, because my husband, it's not his thing. He's really good with his hands, but he's not really good with any of that sort of stuff. And so it was massive. I've never been that stressed over a period of time like that. I thought I was going to go crazy. I thought I was going to end up in the loony bin. I really did. I was drinking a lot of alcohol and it was so hard, such a hard year. So anyway, that stress from that year, it pushed me into menopause. So that year I did 2 pregnancy tests because I just stopped getting my periods, and it was just the stress from the business. My health after we got out of it kind of gradually deteriorated, and then 2 years after that, around about 2 years after that, I was diagnosed with an overactive thyroid. Having an overactive thyroid, overactive is not what I had expected as a diagnosis. As I've spoken about in other videos, I don't have a GP. I don't generally go to doctors unless there's something going on that I can't work out. And that's what happened here. So I had some bits and pieces that were going on that I didn't seem to be able to resolve, just different things from my normal gut issues and everything. And so I found a doctor on the Sunshine Coast. We were living at that stage in Harvey Bay in Queensland. And so I found a doctor on the Sunshine Coast who was a little bit of a functional medicine practitioner. And so I went to her, and luckily she did the right tests and she found out that my thyroid was overactive. And she wanted me to go to an endocrinologist, and I said no. I said I'm going to go home and I'm going to read up and I'm going to find a way to sort this out naturally because I know what their answers are. If I'd gone to see an endo, they would have put me on the horrible drug that they put people on with Graves' disease, and then when that doesn't work, you want to either cut your thyroid out or irradiate it. And I wasn't having any of that, so there was no point in me even going. So I went home, went to the library, and I got every book out that had alternative information in it about thyroid disease. And I jumped online and I started watching everything. And what I ended up doing, and it sounds a bit bizarre, but what I ended up doing was I did a juice feast for almost 3 months. So I lived on juice, just fruit and vegetable juices, for 78 days. It was all up, and with no solid food. The only solid food that I had towards the end was bee pollen. I'd have a tablespoon of bee pollen a day. And what that juice feast did, so it's 3 to 4 litres of juice a day. What that did was, it was a lot easier with my bowel because I wasn't having diarrhea all the time. It reduced my symptoms right down, I guess because it took out a lot of the foods that were causing problems with the way my gut was. And so it reduced my symptoms right down, but it didn't get rid of it. So then after I'd done that, I came off the juice feast because we were coming to New Zealand on holiday. And when I started eating again, oh my Lord, I ended up so constipated. I've never been that constipated before. We were on holiday over here at the time, and I was beside myself. I didn't know what I was going to do. Ended up resolving it, but oh my Lord, it was so bad. And then what happened was that my body seemed to be not digesting food very well. Surprise. And so all my lettuce and especially raw veggies and stuff, because I used to eat a lot of raw plants, were passing straight through me into the toilet, undigested. And that little problem really never went away until carnivore, I suppose, because I stopped eating all those raw plants. So I did do the GAPS diet. So this is when I was first introduced to the GAPS diet, was after I had come off the juice feast and things weren't working very well on my gout. I ended up stumbling across Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride and her GAPS diet. So I borrowed the book from the library and I read it. So this was her original book, and I tried the GAPS diet. And the beginning of it, I removed all plants from my diet, right? Which was a bizarre thing for me back then. I took all the plants out and I was just having meat broth and meat, and then I gradually introduced some eggs and some yogurt and bits and pieces, and then just gradually some cooked veggies, which is the way that the GAPS diet kind of goes. But I remember I did it reasonably quickly, but it made a massive difference. When I took those plants out of my diet initially, it made a huge difference to my gut. I kept making broths for 2 years because that's what it had basically said in the book, but I didn't stick with the diet for long enough. So it got rid of my thyroid symptoms, and I've never really had issues with my thyroid since, but I stayed strictly off gluten and strictly off corn ever since then, because I realised that corn was an issue as well with my thyroid. So I have never eaten gluten or corn basically since then. So I think that made a big difference with my thyroid as well. And the GAPS diet definitely helped. But yeah, I didn't stay on it long enough to heal my gout. So what I did was I did it for a little while, the strict version, and then I just kept making meat broth and having that. I did that for 2 years, but I went back to my normal diet with all the raw food and stuff and drinking copious amounts of wine. So I didn't actually heal my gout, but it did help. And as I said, in amongst all of that, I just still kept going back and forth to a vegan diet because, raw plants are the thing, right? They're going to keep you healthy. So then I moved back to New Zealand 10 years ago, and I set my business back up here. So we moved back, ended up back in the town that we'd been in last time. And I ended up opening my business again, doing massage and soft tissue work in the same building where I had been prior. I had forgotten that building had a mould issue, a bad mould issue. It wasn't until it was all arranged and I was moving in there, and then I was like, oh my God, I'd forgotten about the mould in this building. And I thought, oh, it'll be all right. It'll be fine. I use essential oils and, I wasn't here before and it didn't seem to be too bad. So I spent 4.5 years in there and then ended up moving my business home because I realised that the mould was making me really, really sick. So what had happened was, after I'd been back in that building for a year, I suddenly gained a massive amount of weight. And I actually wonder whether mould was an issue years ago in Queensland, because we'd been in North Queensland for most of the first year that we were in Queensland in Australia. And we bought a newer caravan when we first moved to Australia, but then that was only a smallish caravan, so we swapped it for a bigger one in Townsville. And this bigger van was older. It had obviously had some water damage in the ceiling. I actually wonder whether there was mould in that van, and maybe that was part of my problem as well, because some of these symptoms and things that were going on this time were very similar to last time. So I gained a massive amount of weight really quickly. Like, it seemed like it went on overnight. And I didn't know why it had gone on like that. And then just gradually my health, started having more issues with the anxiety, and the diarrhea got worse and the gut issues. And then it was only when I kind of developed a cough that wouldn't go away. I had this cough for over a year that I really realised that I needed to get out of there, because the mould was really a problem. It was the cough that made me click that was what was going on. And so I moved my business home and started trying to clean my body up from the mould, but I really wasn't getting very far with it. And I think part of the problem was the house that we were in had a bit of a mould problem. The windows would get really, really wet and just run, and mould would grow on the rubbers around the windows, and we would try and keep them clean, but it was just kind of this ongoing thing in their house. And then even the next house we moved into had a mould issue as well. This one seems to be really dry, and I seem to be finally really healing quite well in this house. But anyway, back to where I was. So my gut and my bowel got worse, my anxiety got worse, I developed the cough, and all these symptoms were going on. I got to the point where I was so overweight, I couldn't exercise, I just had no energy. I had enough energy to run my business, and that was about it, and even that was a push sometimes. I was having nosebleeds every day, sometimes multiple times a day. I was getting these dizzy spells where I felt like I was just going to pass out, and it was really horrible. All my heart was doing weird stuff. I had all of these symptoms going on, and I thought, I'm going to end up dying. I just had this, kind of impending feeling of doom, which is what I had when I was 30, before I quit smoking. Same thing, just this feeling that I was dying, and if something didn't change, I was going to end up in real trouble. So I was trying different things. About a year before Carnivore, I tried the Dr. McDougall starch stuff, and I lost weight on that, but I didn't feel any better. And then I went from that basically to general kind of vegan diet, because hubby and I sat down and watched the documentary GAMECHANGER, and nice little propaganda piece there by whatever his name is, the producer that lives down in the Wairarapa here in New Zealand. And that had us convinced, because, I was on board with the whole vegan thing anyway. Hubby never had been, but it made him sit up and take notice. It was his idea. He said, maybe we should go vegan. So we did. He dropped 15 kilos in 3 months of muscle, lost the rest of his testosterone, and as usual, it did nothing for me except make me go to the toilet more. And so then when we just realised that really wasn't working for us, hubby was so skinny, his arms were just bone. Then I went keto, so he went back to eating his normal diet. I went onto a keto diet, and again, I was losing weight, but I wasn't feeling any better. So I'd been eating a keto diet for about probably 3 months, I guess, and I was following Dr. Mindy Pelz on YouTube, and I saw a video of her interviewing Paul Saladino. Now, Paul Saladino at that point was still eating a carnivore diet, and what he said made sense. And I thought, it seemed absolutely mental to me to drop plants out of my diet. But I was kind of desperate, and so I thought, well, I will try it for 30 days. I'll just give it a go. And it was like when I started eating meat again initially, and I was in my 40s, it was like this whole mind difficulty, like wrapping my head around this. I mean, going shopping and not buying bucket loads of fruits and vegetables, and not having my fridge full of fruit and vegetables. It's actually really hard. But I did it, and I jumped in, stopped all the plants, and oh my Lord, the difference in the way that I felt very quickly is what kept me on the carnivore diet. Now, I felt better. My energy was better, my sleep was better. I wasn't having to get up and go and pee during the night initially. I do now. Sometimes I go through phases where I do, but initially I didn't have to. My nosebleeds, the nosebleeds that I was having every day, stopped initially, and then later on they came back sometimes, but pretty much gone now. The dizzy spells dropped right off. So I had been having those every day, sometimes multiple times a day, and they were horrible. And they stopped. The heart thing that I was experiencing stopped, and this was all very quick. Even I had a keratosis thing on my hand that was quite big. I had a few. I've still got a couple of little ones, but there was quite a big one on this hand. That disappeared really quickly within a couple of weeks. And I was just like, what the hell? And then I realised that I was putting on muscle. I was getting stronger, and I wasn't even doing any exercise. And I couldn't get enough meat into my body. I was so hungry. I gained weight. Initially on carnivore, but I knew that could happen because I had done my research, and so I just went with it as much as it was kind of freaking me out, and things just started to improve. But not everything improved. So initially my diarrhea got better for a couple of weeks, and then it got worse, way worse. It was really bad. Really, really difficult to live with. I had a phase where every time I ate, I'd be in the toilet like 10 or 15 minutes later. So I could only eat one meal a day, dinner. I couldn't eat during the day because otherwise I'd be in the toilet all day and I had clients to see. So I had to do OMED. And I would eat and within 10 or 15 minutes, I'd be running to the toilet and flat out making it. And it was just like water diarrhea. And that went on for months and months and months. It increased my anxiety massively. The anxiety was already there, but because the diarrhea got worse, that made the anxiety way worse. And, I got to the point where I was kind of thinking to myself, if this doesn't settle, this is going to kill me, even though I'm eating a carnivore diet, because the stress is just massive, and stress is really hard on your body. This is part of the problem, is your gut can't heal when you're stressed. When you're stressed, it breaks down your stomach lining and it causes leaky gut in your small intestine. And so I was kind of aware of that, and I'm thinking, how do I fix this? How do I get it to stop? Now, I think part of my problem with all of this is, so I had the mold illness, which was a huge part of what was going on. And a couple of years ago, I started looking into my genetics because I had my DNA done with Ancestry. And so I had the reports from that. And I put them through a couple of online things and was looking through my genetics and realised that I have a compound MTHFR gene variations, which I suspected that I had. And I've got some other dodgy genes. So that kind of explains some stuff from the past that's gone on with my health and the difficulties, I guess, that my body has had with some things. So that's my history, basically, and what brought me to carnivore now. So what has improved for me after 3 years on carnivore? So my gut health has improved massively, even though until recently the diarrhea kept rearing its head and the anxiety. That is just about gone now as well. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But some of the other things that have changed is interesting. There's some unexpected things. So receding hair, I actually didn't realise that I had a receding hairline until it started to fill in. So these bits up here on the side of my head, when I started on carnivore, I had no fringe, and I had photos of me with my hair tied up. And I remember looking at the photos and thinking, I don't like the way my hair looks on the side, when it's tied up. And it was because these bits here had receded quite bad. I'll pop some photos up so you can see. And it wasn't until one day I had my hair tied back, and I realised I had all these little bits that wouldn't sit down. And they looked like little horns. I had these bits here, and I took photos. And I realised that my hair was actually growing back. It was filling back in these patches up on the side here. So that was one thing that was early in the piece that I kind of realised was changing. I was like, that's pretty cool. The next thing is weight loss and body recomposition. So my weight loss has been really slow. I've been eating a carnivore diet for 3 years. I still have a fair bit of weight to lose. And I haven't lost a whole lot on the scales, but the body recomposition has been pretty amazing. So I have people that say to me these days, if they haven't seen me for a little while, they'll be going, you've lost a lot of weight. I actually haven't lost a lot on the scales. I don't actually know what I weigh now. My scales broke, and I had decided that I wasn't going to weigh myself for a while. And then they broke the day after. So I took that as the universe telling me, you're on track, forget about weighing for a while. But my measurements have gone down lots. My body shape has changed lots. I've got a lot more muscle on my body. I'm a lot stronger, even though I hadn't been doing any exercise. I still struggle with the exercise right now. When you consider I used to be such an exercise junkie for a lot of years, and now I struggle to stick with it, but I want to get back to something kind of regular eventually. So the body recomposition has been just amazing, and I think part of that is also because I realised that I have lipedema, which is an inflammatory fat disorder thing, and I think that the diet is gradually making a difference to the lipedema and the inflammation that's caused by that. Now, another thing that has happened is that has obviously reversed my biological age. Now, I haven't been tested, so I don't have any proof of this, but I look and I feel younger. I'll pop up a couple of pictures of me from earlier in the piece, me aged 58, the year I started carnivore, compared to now. I am currently 61, and things have definitely improved. And so, yeah, I'm pretty happy with the way that's going. The reversal of biological age is something that's fairly obvious and very common on a carnivore diet. Another thing that's happened is that, and that's something that's just changing now, so 3 years in, is that my gums are healing. So I had gum disease back when I was vegan. I didn't realise that I did. My gums used to bleed every morning, and I just thought that was something that was fairly normal. And then they stopped bleeding before I even started on the carnivore diet. I used to bleed a little bit, but they had started receding quite badly. My bottom teeth, they've got quite big pockets on some of my teeth, but I've noticed over the last couple of months that some of them are coming back up, and I've got a lot less inflammation. I used to get a lot of inflammation in the gums on the back of my front bottom teeth, and they would swell up, and I think part of that has been due to oxalate dumping as well since I've been on carnivore. But anyway, that's all settling down, and my gums don't swell up on the back now. And yeah, I've noticed that some of the teeth, a couple of the teeth, looks like the pockets are not as deep as they were. So they seem to be healing. My teeth feel a lot stronger since I've been eating a carnivore diet. Prior to carnivore, I kind of felt like my teeth weren't strong anymore. It's a hard thing to explain, but I felt like I always had to kind of be careful with my teeth because I was worried that they were going to break, whereas now they feel quite resilient and quite strong again, which is great. My brain health has improved, my memory, my focus, my clarity, just the way my brain works, just all seems to be so much better. My mood and my mental health is way, way better. I don't really have any issues with depression anymore. I used to all the time, and that was something that had always been there right since I was a teenager. And my gut health, of course, is so much better. I have got no abdominal pain right now, no inflammation in my gut. I used to always be inflamed in my digestive system, so if I poked around, that was always sore, quite painful to touch, and now it's not. So that has changed massively. My diarrhea is now finally gone after 3 years. That has taken some other strategies, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But first, I'm going to tell you what carnivore didn't fix for me yet. I still have some skin issues, and I know that these are connected to my gut. And so as my gut heals more, these will resolve. So one of them is my scalp. I did some videos earlier in the piece about my scalp. I had this wild psoriasis, flaky, itchy scalp for close to 2 years. It started about 6 months after I started on the carnivore diet, and it's almost gone. I've got a little bit across the back of my scalp. Still gets really itchy, still a bit flaky, but nothing like it was. And the other thing that I've had issues with is like an acne, which kind of comes and goes since I've been on carnivore. And I'm not sure whether that is oxalate dumping or what that kind of triggers that, but again, it will all be to do with my gut, and it is getting better and better as time goes on. Initially, when it started, my skin was terrible when I first started on carnivore. In fact, I looked terrible when I first started on carnivore, and I think there was just so much detox going on in my body and so much for my body to cope with. It was really showing on me where I was at when in the first year or so that I was on the carnivore diet, when my body was really struggling. My sleep quality is still variable, but it's better again just recently. It had been really good initially when I started on carnivore, and then it's been kind of up and down. And as I said, the diarrhea was still an issue off and on until just about 2 months ago. So what I was finding is I could go for a week or 10 days, I'd have no diarrhea, and I'd be like, yes, I've nailed it, and then it would be back. And the anxiety as well was kind of always there. So the diarrhea would be triggered by just random things, a change in my diet, a new supplement, all sorts of things, everything caused diarrhea. But then what happened was I started taking that Regimen that I talked about at the beginning of the video. I started taking that about 2 months ago, almost 2 months ago now. And I'm also now taking TMG as well. But what I found was as soon as I started taking that Regimen, my bowel habits just changed and my anxiety went. And so I'm not having those issues anymore. My bowel can still be a little bit loose sometimes, but I haven't got diarrhea, and I haven't had diarrhea now for 2 months, even though I had dropped all of the plants out of my diet again when I started on GAPS. And so I've done about 6 weeks on the GAPS diet now, with basically no plants. Up until the last couple of days I've had something, but prior to that, every time I tried to drop plants out of my diet on carnivore, the diarrhea would get worse or come back or whatever. So I've always kept just a little bit in for a lot of the time. Not all the time. I've had long periods where I haven't, but the diarrhea would always be bad because I would try going without the plants and then end up giving up because the diarrhea just wouldn't quit. And then, so I'd have just a little bit of some sort of fibre just seemed to make a difference. So a little bit of fermented veg or some berries just, I don't know, seemed to help. And so that's kind of what I've been doing for the last 3 years is I do a patch where I'm strict carnivore, doesn't work, back onto a few plants. But yeah, not much. I mean, when I'm talking some fermented veggies, a forkful like that. So it's not a lot, but it just, for some reason, makes a difference or made a difference. But now I had started on the NMN and everything just settled down. And then I had been planning to start the GAPS diet, but I was waiting on my book arriving. So I got my book and then started reading it. And then I started on the GAPS diet about 6 weeks ago. And my bowel has been fantastic. My anxiety, I mean, that's a huge one. My stress levels have just gone down because of all of this. And so it's changing me and changing in my life. And it's just amazing. And so because I'm on GAPS, I am basically living at the moment on meat broth, stews, ferments. I've also been making some beet kvass because I've never tried that before. And so it's just the liquid that you're drinking. You don't actually eat the beetroot. And it's actually quite nice. So I thought I'll give that a go. It's another fermented something to put into my body. And so, yeah, as I said, my bowel has been fantastic. When it has been a little bit loose, I'm only going to the toilet a couple of times a day in the morning, and instead of many times a day. And there's no anxiety about it, really. So it's just completely different. There is a carnivore version of GAPS, which is no plants, and if your gut continues to play up, that's the advice is to go there. So that's pretty much where I've been for the last 6 weeks. But I want to try having a little bit of fibre because it just still seems to make my bowel motions a little bit better. So it just keeps them a little bit firmer as long as I don't have too much, I think. So I'm just kind of experimenting with that at the moment, but definitely still sticking to the GAPS diet, and I'm going to stick to that long term and get this gut healed up properly. I'm also going to continue taking the NMN and the TMG, and I'm going to actually try adding resveratrol because that helps to increase the benefits of the NMN. So I'm looking forward to seeing where I'm at in another year or 2 or 3. Things are definitely on the up and up, and I am so very grateful to finally be living without diarrhea. So that's where I'm at after 3 years on the carnivore diet. I have, over those 3 years, tried so many different things. I've got a lot of videos on my channel talking about the different places that I've, phases that I've been at and the things that I had been trying and the conclusions that I come to. If I'd put all of those into this video, we would have been here for hours. So if you want to go back and look at any of those, I mean, I've been through SIBO protocols and things for my liver and all sorts, because I realised that all of these things were all playing a part. I did have a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. My gallbladder wasn't working properly. I probably had parasites. All of these different things that after having decades of gut issues are probably going to be a problem, and then the mold illness just made everything so much worse. If you have any comments or questions, pop them down below. I will put a link to the particular products below the video, and as I said, if you want to order from them, if you use Carnivore 15, you get 15% off if you use that link. I thank you very much. If you've got any comments or questions, put them below. As I said, I'll get to them as soon as I can. I thank you very much for watching and listening to me today. If you're still here at this point, thank you for listening. And yeah, I'll talk to you again another day. Bye for now.